good to go. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Sippin' Ground Coffee, our summer series of live streaming podcasts. We're going to have a lot of topics to talk about over the next couple of months. Thank you, Derek, bringing in that Groundwater coffee. I love it. At any rate, we're going to be doing a lot of different topics over the next couple of months. And so that said, hit the like button, subscribe to our newsletter. I'm going to give you a code word today, and that code word can be used for some awards that we're going to give towards the end of this. In other words, if you watch 3 different sessions, and when I give you the code word, you email that in to marketing@flintandwalling.com. You'll get credit for that session. If you get 3 credits, 3 different sessions, then I think you're going to be up for some kind of an award towards the end of the summer series here. So don't forget to subscribe to all that. Today's topic is how to rebuild and repair a centrifugal pump. This is going to be a live kind of a teardown of a centrifugal pump. But before we, and the other thing, I often fail to mention, if you have any questions as we go through this, please don't be embarrassed to ask or bashful. Go ahead and just drop it in the chat or whatever you need to do to get it in. And the great team here at Flint and Walling will make sure that I'm aware of the questions as they come in. So again, don't be bashful to ask those questions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the how to repair and rebuild a centrifugal pump. So I'm going to go back to my slides just for a moment. And there we go. You know, just a few notes before we actually get into the teardown of a pump, all right? You know, if I were installing this pump, I'd tell my customer that I'm going to install this in a manner in which it can be easily serviced down the road, you know, for whatever reason. There's some things that we can do upon initial installation that will make this pump much more serviceable down the road. And my guess is if this pump ever needs service and you're the one that gets the phone call for it, you know, why not make it easy on yourself? So anyway, here's what I'm talking about. If we look at the just some things on this pump here, let's see if that works again. There we go. All right, a couple things to point out on the front of the pump, this front pump casting here. There is what's called a priming plug. This is removed while priming the pump. You'll find that you'll be able to prime this pump much more efficiently, much more quicker, giving the air a place to escape out of the pump body and the suction line. Down here at the bottom, right there, is a drain plug, all right? Note the orientation here, because once we take this pump body off, we really do have 4 choices of how to put it back on, of which only one is going to be correct. So the one that's correct, obviously, will be the one that has the drain plug down here at the bottom. So when we talk about making this more serviceable, all right, here's some things that we can do to make it more serviceable. On the discharge of the pump, I would strongly encourage that you incorporate a T on the discharge. Some pumps, not all, some pumps have dedicated priming ports up here on the top of the pump body. These centrifugal pumps, on the other hand, as most of them, they do not have a so-called dedicated priming port, but you can create one by simply incorporating a T on the top of that, right on the discharge side of that pump. Put a plug in the top of it. Now you've got a place that you can pull that plug out and you can prime the pump up pretty readily that way. Not just today, but down the road should it need to be reprimed for whatever reason down the road. All right, so I know some contractors will replace that plug and they'll actually put a bushing in there. And they'll thread a pressure gauge up on top of that bushing. And again, it's still a priming port, right? So whether you just put a plug in there or you want to put a gauge up there, that's a choice that you can make. The other thing that we can do with this pump to make it much more serviceable, and that is to add unions to the thing and put unions on both the suction side and the discharge side. Again, if this pump ever has to be taken out or removed for service, winterization, whatever the case may be, if you've got unions there, it's going to make that job a lot easier and a lot quicker. And it's going to look a lot better by the time we get back to putting the pump back in. You know, short of any of that, you're going to have to cut pipe, right? If you don't do any of those, you're going to have to cut pipe. either to prime it or to remove it from the system. So those just a few things up front. And of course, anytime we're going to work on a pump, we want to just make sure that you don't have any power running to that motor, right? So I'd cut the power off at least at the pressure switch, if not at the breaker box. But go ahead and cut that power off. And then if there's any pressure on this pump at all, you're going to want to release that pressure before you start taking it apart. So if you've got a plug up here on the discharge on that priming port, you can loosen that, and that would release pressure off the pump, or just open a valve somewhere just to get the pressure so it's drained down to zero. All right, drained down to zero. So it's at this point then, we're going to, at this point, I'm gonna stand up and we're gonna take this pump apart, all right? So Renee, we're gonna go back to this full shot here. I think I'm gonna stand up. My head's not in the picture, that's okay with me. All right, first thing we're gonna do, right? We got the pump, there was no power going to this pump. We've got the pressure off of this pump. So the very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove what are called pump through bolts. There's 4 of them up here, all right? And whether this is a jet pump or a centrifugal like you're looking at, or whether it's a self-priming lawn sprinkling pump, what we're going to be doing is very, very common throughout all those types of pumps. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to remove these 4 through bolts. And I'm going to make a confession to you. I loosened everything up because I'm not going to sit here and struggle taking this thing apart in front of you. So I went on ahead and loosened them up. But with a 9/16 box end wrench or a socket wrench, either one, what we're going to do is we're going to remove all 4 of these pump through bolts. So I'm going to, like I said, I've loosened these all up so I can actually do this somewhat blindly from the back side. And I'll turn that microphone so it's not rubbing against my shirt. And hopefully, once I get these off, get these out, all right, now we're ready to take that front flange off. In reality, you're probably going to need one of these, all right, because there's a gasket behind that front flange. And look, this pump's never seen water other than the water we ran it through on our testing out here while we manufactured it. But this pump's never been installed. So this casting is going to come off quite easily. But in reality, when this is installed and out on a job site, you're probably going to need a hammer to bang that front casting loose. To break it free from that gasket material, which typically tends to have a little bit of adhesiveness to it. So here comes the front flange off. And right behind it is a gasket, okay? So we're going to take the front flange off, we're going to take the gasket off. And again, in your case, you're probably going to have gasket material sticking to both this casting as well as the pump flange. So we're going to make sure we clean all that gasket material off there. All right, now we're at the impeller, all right? And on a jet pump, we'd be at the impeller. Once you take this front body off, you're at the impeller. Same with a self-priming lawn sprinkling pump. This pump today that I'm taking apart is actually a 2-stage, all right? There's 2 impellers on this pump. These centrifugal pumps you can get either in a single stage or you can go 2 or 3 stages. Now, to take the impeller off, and again, I'm just going to talk to you about the way that the manufacturer suggests and recommends that this pump, the way that it be disassembled, all right? So, that said, to take the impeller off, one of the things that we're going to need to do is we're going to take that same 9/16 box end wrench. I'm going to turn this pump just briefly, but between the pump body and the motor, there's a flat spot on the motor shaft here, all right? There's a flat spot on that shaft. You might be able to see that a little closer. Here's where the impeller threads on, and then right there is that flat spot on the shaft. You might be able to see that flat spot. That's what you're going to put that wrench on, all right? That's what the wrench will go on to, just like this. Whoops, just like this here, all right? And the idea of that is just to hold the shaft stationary so that you can thread the impeller off. Now, if this happens to be a single stage pump or a different series of pumps, there's a chance that the pump body is mounted right up against the motor. So there is no area in here to get to a flat shaft. So in those cases, what we'll do is we'll cut a flat screwdriver slot on the end of this shaft. All right, so that once you get to that point, you can put a flat bladed screwdriver in the end of that shaft and hold it stationary, just like you would if you had a wrench back here on this flat spot. So we're going to hold the shaft stationary. Now, what we're going to use next to take the impeller off is a strap wrench, all right? This is what's called a strap wrench. These are readily available. You know, when I was a kid, man, I used to use a wrench like this when I would change the oil in my car. I'd use this wrench to take the oil filter off, so a lot of you are familiar with it. But this strap wrench will go around the impeller like this on the outside of the impeller, so that when we're turning this impeller, we're not damaging it in any way, shape, or form. So a strap wrench is going to be used to not only take the impeller off, but to also turn it around. We'll put the impeller back on that way. I've loosened this one up already, so I'm going to go ahead and spin this impeller off. And it's just threaded on the shaft. And so here we go. Once that impeller is free, all right? Once the impeller is free, it's at this point that I can do some inspections, all right? When it comes to these impellers, Flint & Walling will offer both a no-lead, 100% balanced bronze impeller, or you can get a balanced thermal plastic injection molded impeller. The way we balance impellers, by the way, you may be able to see that. We take material off the back side. All right, that's how we bring a bronze impeller into balance. Unlike a tire where you add weight, we're actually removing weight off the back side of these impellers. So that's how we balance those things. All right, now again, this is a two-stage pump. Had this been a single-stage pump, I would be back to here's your code word, cartridge. All right, there's your code word, cartridge. So write that down somewhere. Make sure you email that into marketing@flintandwalling.com. That's the code word for the day. You're going to get credit for today's session. But if this were a single stage pump and I took that impeller off, I'd right now be at the point of where the cartridge seal is at. All right, but because
Can you turn your mic a little bit towards me?
there you go. Is that a little better? Okay. Yeah. So I would be at the cartridge seal. But because this is a two-stage pump, I simply need to just repeat what we've already done here. So I'm going to take, and again, you'll probably need a rubber mallet to get these segments separated. But I'm going to take the next segment off. All right. And when I do that, I'm at my second impeller. There's my gasket material. All right. That's just the way that all comes apart there. All right, now I'm to the second impeller. Once again, we would use a strap wrench to remove this impeller from the motor shaft or the pump shaft, and it'll take a little bit of threading to get this one off because, again, that shaft's threaded all the way down to this second impeller. And in the case of a three-stage pump, we'd have to do this all one more time. But once we get these impellers off, all right, I'm going to bring the slides back up. Here, I think I'm almost there. A little more spin. Like I said, that's a lot of threads on that shaft. It's coming. There we go. All right. Now, when I took that impeller off, you can see this spring came off with it. I'm going to circle back on this in a second. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and shove this back on here for now. I want to switch to our slides because I want to talk about these impellers. All right. With regards to the impellers, like I mentioned, you can get a 100% no lead balanced bronze impeller, or you can get a self-manufactured, we manufacture these ourselves, plastic injection molded impeller. Irrespective of which type of impeller you have, once we get to these impellers, we're going to want to make sure that there's no debris in the eye of this impeller. So we want to make sure there's no debris in that eye. And we also want to make sure that the vanes are clear. Now, this is a cutaway of a three-stage, all right? This is a cutaway of a three-stage. And I'm going to just tell you just a quick story real quick. I'll try to make this brief because I oftentimes get asked, okay, painter, if you can get a plastic impeller or a bronze impeller or a no-lead bronze, which is better? Which one do you think's better? Well, I'm going to tell you this much. I don't think I'd turn my hand for the difference in performance because they both perform very, very comparably, nor would I really say that there's a difference in quality, longevity, whatever you want. Our warranty return rates on these pumps are ridiculously low anyway, probably trending less than 0.5%. So they both last a long, long time. But I had this pump at a show one day, this three-stage pump. It was an open house, and it was at a hotel in a ballroom, and they opened the doors up, and all these contractors come walking in, and I had a contractor come walking up to my table where I had this three-stage cutaway sitting on the table, and he looked at that, and I thought this dude was going to wet his pants when he saw those impellers in there. He pointed at him and said, those are brass impellers in there, as if maybe I didn't know. I mean, I go, yes, sir, they sure are. He said, they're no lead, by the way. He goes, well, I didn't know any pump company used brass impellers anymore. And I said, well, I don't know about that, but you got a choice when it comes to F&W. You got a choice between no lead bronze and plastic. He said to me, he said, I think those brass impellers might solve a problem I'm having. I said, what kind of problem you having? He said, well, I've got a lake up north of us, a big lake. And he said, all around that lake, I've got centrifugal pumps. They're not yours, but I got a bunch of them out there. And the problem I'm having with the plastic impellers is every season, and I assume he was talking about every year. He said, every season I got to go out and replace every one of those impellers. I go, what? He goes, yes, I got to replace every one of them. And it's a pain in the butt. He goes, there's been times I've had to go out and replace the same impeller twice in the same season. I go, man, dude, what's going on with the impellers? He said, they are in shreds, absolute shreds. I get to this impeller. He goes, it's just shredded, like it looks like a bird's nest. I said, well, man, something's causing that. He goes, well, I know what's causing it. I said, well, what is that that's causing it? He said, shells. I said, you mean like a seashell? He goes, yes, sir, like a seashell. And he said, they get inside this pump body, and when that impeller's up and running and spinning, he said, it breaks all those shells up into little pieces, and the things become so daggone abrasive, they just shred my impellers. I imagine those bronze ones will hold up a lot better, won't they? That's what he asked me. And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to tell you something. We've deadheaded this thing for 30 minutes 3 times. That's pumping against a closed valve. I don't know of any other pump out there that'll make it through that protocol. We've run it dry for 4 hours. I don't know any pump out there will make it through that. Most of them won't make it an hour. It's the material of construction. But, sir, I never run any shells through this thing. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're going to have a better luck with that. But on the other hand, if I had your track record, I think I'd be willing to roll the dice. So there we go. A year later, I show up at the same show. Here it comes. This same guy walking up with a big old back and forth strut, smile on his face, looks at me and says, hey, you remember me? I said, I sure do, man. Not only do I remember you, I remember the story you told me. You're the guy that was replacing all the plastic impellers. He goes, yep, that's me. I go, what'd you ever do? He said, I replaced all those pumps with yours. I said, well, that's awesome, dude. I assume you use the bronze impellers. He goes, absolutely. And I said, well, is there a verdict? He goes, yeah, man. Well, he said, I had to go out on one of those. I suppose maybe there are occasions where that bronze impeller may have some advantages, perhaps over the plastic. But again, from a performance standpoint, I wouldn't turn my hand for the difference. All right, so now, let's see where we're at with this. So now once you get these impellers off, and again, it doesn't matter whether it's the bronze or the brass, but once you get these impellers off, you're going to want to inspect the eye of these impellers, all right? That's the eye, and that's the hub back here, all right? So this is the eye. You're going to want to make sure there's nothing in that eye of that impeller, no foreign particles or any debris lodging in the inside of that impeller. The other thing that you're going to want to do is take a I'm trying to advance a slide here. I'm sorry. Okay, so take a stiff wire and go down through those veins, all right? Go down through those veins. Make sure there's nothing in there either. Oftentimes, these impellers can be cleaned and replaced, or they can be cleaned and reused. Sometimes they get replaced, but if you do not damage it getting it off, because what will happen most of the time is somebody's going to put an adjustable wrench around the eye of that impeller. That's 90% of the time that's going to happen. And you know, that's a risk, because if you damage this eye in any way, just even slightly, that'll change the dynamics of this pump beyond comprehension. So anyway, that's the case of those impellers. When you're all done with that, you can flush this all with water, and this impeller could be ready to be reused or reinstalled or replaced, whichever we're going to do there. Look for any damage or any excessive wear. All right, so now where we're at here now, is we're at a place there's your code word, it's called a cartridge. Some people refer to this as a cartridge seal, some people call it a rotational seal, some people call it a mechanical seal. It doesn't matter by what name we call it. I want to talk about this seal for a little bit because this is probably the most commonly replaced component on an above ground or a surface type pump. It's a seal that sits back here, and what that seal does, it seals this pump body off from that shaft that's going back into the motor so that we don't get water leaking out of here. And the reason I wanted to talk about this seal a little bit, let me see if this next slide is going to bring that up there. Okay. When did they need to be replaced? That might be a question. When do they need to be replaced? Well, I'll answer that. Anytime there's water leaking between the pump body and the motor, anytime there's water leaking down out of here, that's an indication that that seal's bad and that needs to be replaced. So there's your symptom is water's dripping down underneath this mounting ring, and you've got a seal that's leaking. And again, that's a very, very common component that's replaced on so many above ground pumps. So what causes those leaks? Well, one thing that can cause leaks is heat. And, you know, anytime a pump is, let's suppose a pump is deadheading. This happens in irrigation more often than we'd like. And what that basically means is we got a pump that's pumping against a closed valve. Somebody inadvertently closed the valve off, so there's no place for the water to go. The pump comes on, it powers up, and it's trying to pump water, and all it can do is sit there and churn that same water over and over and over again. And in so doing, it creates a lot of heat. In fact, you can generate enough heat that can actually boil that water. So that'll cause a ceramic seal to go bad in a heartbeat, all right? That can cause a ceramic seal or a cartridge seal to go bad in a heartbeat. What else can cause that? Well, abrasives. We talked about that a little bit ago, but sand and abrasives can also be an attributing factor to a premature failing mechanical seal or a cartridge seal. You know, so many times these pumps are installed on lakes or surface water applications, and, you know, that can be murky. When it rains, that whole thing turns over, and it just, you know, you can have a lot of sediment, sand, and abrasives in there. That'll wear on a cartridge seal. And then, of course, the last thing is they won't last forever. They're going to eventually wear out, all right? They're going to eventually wear out. So the last thing I want to say before we talk about how we go about replacing this thing is I want to tell you that all F&W pumps are going to use what's called a silicon carbide, a cartridge seal. Silicon carbide, all right? Now would like you to remember that because it's a selling feature, all right? And I want to show you why it's a selling feature. When we compare silicon carbide to the industry, for the most part, our competitors, by and large, most all of them will use what's called a ceramic carbon cartridge seal in their pumps. It's not a bad seal. It's compared to a silicon carbide, it's a lot less costly, but the reason that we don't use ceramic carbon, and the reason I guess we pay probably 3 times more for the cartridge seal that we put in these pumps than we would if we bought ceramic carbon, is this. You know, ceramic's a great material. It's got a great sealing surface. People would tell you it's nice and smooth, and oh my gosh, yeah, all those things are right. But ceramic does not like temperature change. So once you get a temperature change, what you're going to find is ceramic cracks. It fractures. You get little hairline cracks down through it. And when that happens, guess what? You're leaking, all right? So it's time to replace it. So when we look at the silicon carbide versus the ceramic carbon, like I said, we can take a lot more heat tolerances here, whether we're deadheading or running dry. We can take a lot more heat tolerances here. We can also handle sand and abrasives far greater than a ceramic carbon cartridge would do. All right, so I'm giving you a little plug here on our cartridge seal, but I want people to know about it because we spend money and extra time to put that in there so that you're not having to replace this thing as frequently as what a lot of other ones are going to have, a lot of other pumps. So the abrasives, it does that very well, and it will outlast ceramic carbon 5 times to 1. So that's the other thing about the silicon carbide, is that it's much longer lasting. Anyway, enough on that. When we look at the rotary seal, all right, there's 3 components here. And this is where a replacement seal is going to come in a little tube that looks like this. And inside this tube are three components. You're going to have a spring. Let me get my hands around here. You're going to have a spring that you can see here. And then you're going to have 2 face seals that come together, just like these 2 right here. They come together just like that, all right? 2 face seals. So the spring and 2 face seals are what we're going to have in a replacement cartridge. Now, this spring, when you get ready to replace this thing, let's see what we're going to do now, all right? When you get ready to replace this, all right, let me back up a slide. Let me just back up one slide here. There's a cavity back here in the back side of this pump that this seal sits in. I'm not going to take this seal out. Every time you do, you run it, all right? So I'm not going to take this seal out. Rather, I'm going to try to paint a picture with words. So once you've got the impeller off, it's not uncommon that this spring sometimes comes off with the impeller. Sometimes it comes off with the impeller, and sometimes it's still on the shaft seal itself. It doesn't matter. Get the spring out of there. Take it out, all right? Now, to get that first segment off, this first segment, which, let's see what I've done with these things. So this would be the first segment here. All right, so I'm going to try to get you a good look at that. That's that first segment. That's easy to get off of there. Just put an adjustable wrench on there, and you can pull this thing right off the shaft, all right? Then what you're left with is this segment. This is the one where the challenge is going to come in to be. This is your silicon carbide seal rests inside of what looks like a little rubber model tire. That's what it looks like. And this needs to sit back in that cavity, all right? To get this out is a challenge. And what a lot of instruction manuals, including ours, will suggest, it'll suggest a couple of long, thin-bladed screwdrivers that you can, let me see if I can, that you can go back into this thing, and with 2 of them, and pop that out of that cavity. Pop that out of that cavity. Don't use pocket screwdrivers. They're not long enough to get any leverage, all right? So the other way, got a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Someone said, or Scott asked, he said, I've purchased an F&W centrifugal pump for my parents. It's been running like a champ. How should I routine this, or how often do I service this pump?
So they had bought a centrifugal pump for a family member.
Yep, and they're just wondering how often do they routinely service? Or if it's just for a leak, or if it's making noise?
So in this case, I guess, how often do you routinely service it? Well, it'll let you know when it needs service. It's gonna create some kind of an issue. You'll have some kind of a symptom, but short of that, like I said, when it's running great, it's running great. The other thing, depending on where they're at or where they live, is the possibility that this pump's going to need to be winterized during the inclement times of the year. And that's going to be another session that we're going to have here on this Sippin Groundwater, or Sippin Ground Coffee. That'll be another session on how to winterize a pump. But short of winterizing a pump, it could be years before any service would be needed on that particular pump. All right. Okay, so if you can get in with a couple of thin-bladed screwdrivers, you can pop this, pop this rubber tire that has that silicon carbide seal, pop it out of that cavity. The other way that I've done it, quite frankly, is I just go in with a pair of needle nose. And as I've already mentioned, this has got a rubber, like a rubber tire around it. I just go in and with these needle nose pliers, I'll pinch that rubber, and I'll just yank that thing out of that cavity. I don't care if it comes out in more than one piece or not. I don't care, because I'm replacing it. But I just don't want to spend a lot of time getting it out of there, all right? So either flat-bladed screwdriver, or a couple of them, or a pair of needle nose pliers will allow you to get this last portion of that cartridge seal out of that cavity. Let me show you what this is going to look like in reality. There you go. All right, unlike the pump I've got here, that, like I said, this thing's really never seen much water at all outside of the factory. It's going to be important that we clean this casting up, right? So you've got gasket material that you could, that could be on the outside of here. and also on the suction flange. You want to get rid of all that gasket material, and we're particularly going to want to clean that cavity out. You can see it in that image there, where that new seal is going to have to be reseated at, right there, okay? So now when we replace this, there's some important notes, and they're on this tube here. This is, if you ordered a replacement cartridge seal from Flint & Walling, it's going to ship out in this little tube, and on this tube is a warning, all right? There's a couple of warnings on this tube, and I want to point those out to you. The very first warning is going to suggest that we do not use any kind of silicone grease or, you know, any of that stuff. No Vaseline, nothing. No lubricant other than water. We're going to just use water to lubricate these surfaces on these this shaft seal. That's it, water, all right? Now, when we get ready to put this back, oh, yeah, this is very, very important as well. These two surfaces here, all right? It's these two, I'm going to try to get there. You can see those two surfaces, these come together. Whoops. These will come together just like this. All right, those two surfaces come together. Now, here's what's important. Here's what the warning says. Do not touch those surfaces, not with your fingers. Because if you were repairing this pump, more than likely you've got grit, oil, and whatever else on your fingers. And you do not want to touch those surfaces. They need to be pristine. The warning label on there says that if there's any kind of dirt, dust, or oil particles that get on those surfaces, then this is going to leak. It doesn't say it might leak. It says it will leak. And so we do want to take caution that we do not touch those surfaces when putting this all back together. Because, you know, once it leaks, guess what? We got to do it all over again. So let's not do that. So when we go back to putting this cartridge together, the first thing that would happen is we're going to put this one on the shaft, all right? And you don't need to push that all the way in. And again, don't touch that front surface with your fingers. But all you need to do is kind of just get it started in that little cavity that's back there, all right? Just get it started in that cavity. All right, so here we go. Let's see if and those are the two surfaces right there on those two face seals that we don't want to touch and we want to keep pristine. Whoops. All right, well, no, I guess I don't have slides to show this. All right, so when we push this back on, all right, let me walk you through this reassembly of a cartridge seal. So the very first piece that's going to go on is the piece that's in the little rubber tire, all right? I'm going to push that over the shaft, and only touching the outer edges of that, I'm going to push it to where it just gets started into that cavity. Once I've got the seal started in that cavity, I can go ahead and put this second face seal on, and I don't need to just push it back, all right? Just however far it goes, that's how far it goes. You're not all the way back yet, but who cares? What happens next is we're going to put a spring on this face seal, right? So this spring goes on this face seal, just like that. So once you've got this on, and you got the spring on, the other end of the spring is going to go over the hub of the impeller. All right? Now, I'm going to go ahead and thread this in. Whoops, I got to put that spring on there, right? I don't have the spring on there, so I'm going to put the spring on there. And when I put the spring on, all right, and I go ahead and, I'm doing this blind from the back side, but I'm going to go ahead and thread this impeller on. As I tighten this impeller down, this is going to take a little spinning to get to that point, but as I'm tightening this impeller down, what will happen is that impeller will start to compress that spring. And as that spring starts to compress and the tension on it increases, that spring is going to push that cartridge assembly right back into that cavity exactly where it needs to be so that it seals. And I'm going to keep turning this impeller until it, hand tight, until it stops, which I'm getting close. And then I'm going to put the strap wrench on there, maybe give it another quarter of a turn, right? I've probably got a shaft back here that's turning on me. Let me look here. Okay, I'll take that wrench. what's going on. Here we go. Okay, there we go. All right, so the cartridge seal's now been put in place by virtue of threading this impeller down, compressing the spring, everything behind it gets seated right where it needs to be. Now this is like I said, this is a multi-stage pump here. So with this pump, all these segments you see here, these need to be cleaned up as well, all right? This is what's called a diffuser. And the way a pump works, I don't care whether it's a submersible jet pump, a centrifugal, it doesn't matter. This impeller is going to take water into the eye, and it's going to throw that water out of these veins at an extremely high velocity. That's what an impeller is going to do, high velocity. What a diffuser does is it takes that velocity from that impeller and converts that into pressure. All right, that's what it does. It converts it into pressure. Now, as I reassemble this pump, I'm going to give you a handy tip. And especially when these are more than a single stage, all right? Trying to get these bolts back through all these segments and these gaskets and get them lined up with these openings in this motor mount is a bit challenging, right? It can take a long time to do that. Let me give you a little tip. I went to, I don't know, it was a hardware store, I guess. And I walked in and I said, dude, you got any bolts like this one? The guy said, yeah, absolutely I do. I said, same thread and all? He goes, yeah. I said, do you have them any longer than that? He goes, oh yeah, I got them longer. So what I did is I took the long bolt and ground the head off the end of it, all right? Ground the head off the end of it. Now watch what happens now. I'm still gonna try to do this from the blind side here, just see how this works. So I'm gonna go ahead and start, I call these cheater bolts. Cheater bolts, I'm gonna put one in there, and I'll probably stick one down in here somewhere. There we go. There we go. I got my cheater bolts in now. So now, as I put these segments back together, all right, all my gaskets are going to line up there, there, bring that back. And then my second segment will go on. And because of the cheater bolts, this is going to line up as well. So there comes my second segment. That second segment has they call this a, kind of an oxymoron. They call this a square cut O-ring. I don't know if that's even possible. I call it a quad ring. It is a seal. It's a seal that has 4 surfaces. So we use quad rings versus O-rings because with an O-ring, you've only got 2 sealing surfaces, but with a quad ring, you have actually 4 sealing surfaces, and there's a slot right up there in the front that fits in, so right there. Then I can go ahead and put my second segment on it. Once again, this is a 2-stage pump, so here's another diffuser. Make sure those veins are cleaned out as well, all right? Make sure those veins are all cleaned out as well. But here comes my second segment now. We'll put that on there like this. Whoops, sorry. Put it on like this. There we go. Now I'm actually ready to thread my last impeller on. Here we go. Okay, so I'm only putting these on, I'm only going to put these on hand tight. And then the last thing that goes on is my gasket. These cheater bolts really make it a lot easier. My suction flange, I want to make sure that the drain port right here is located down at the bottom. Maybe I missed it, but where do you get those cheater bolts? Well, I'll tell you what, There was a time a few years ago that when we'd bring contractors up and actually tear these apart in classroom, I'd send them home with a pair as a souvenir. But I just walked into you go to a hardware store, big box store. You just want to get the same threads and get the bolt another couple inches longer so that you've got these sticking out the front here, see? And then, once I've got that pump body back, I want to make sure that the drain plug's down here at the bottom. Once that's done, now what I can do is I can go ahead and put these other 2 bolts in, find the hole there we go. And those should line right up for us, which they do. They line right up. Be another one down here somewhere. doing this from the backside blind. You get the gist. We put these 2 bolts in, and then you can take the 2 cheater bolts out, right? You take the 2 cheater bolts out once you have these 2 bolts in place, and then you can put your remaining 2 bolts back in, all right? Put your remaining 2 bolts back in place. That is the extent of taking a centrifugal pump apart. That's major surgery that we just performed because, again, we went all the way back to the cartridge seal, kind of walked through the replacement of that. I'm going to use needle nose pliers when I replace one, but use whatever you think works best for you to get that popped out of there. Once that we've got the pump all put back together, I'm going to go back to the slides now again just for a minute. So once we got the pump all put back together, all right, now we're ready to reinstall it. And because I've got unions there, it's going to make that install a whole lot easier than it would be if I've got to, couple up the pipe and glue it again. And then, I'm going to have to cut it again the next time I go through this exercise. So once we've got the unions all in place, now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to prime that pump. All right, we're going to prime that pump. And since I have a T on the discharge side of this this pump, I've got a place to prime it. And so I'm going to go ahead and prime that pump. And when we're priming these pumps, it's not just the pump body that we want to get in, but we want that suction line all the way down. Right here at the top is that is a priming plug. I think I mentioned this earlier, but take that priming plug out and you'll find that pump will prime up a lot better for you. And then once that happens, we're on our way and we're sending water to wherever that needs to be. All right. So that's kind of the repair and the rebuild of a centrifugal pump. They're very, very simple in their design. Not a lot of moving parts. You've got an impeller in there, and that's about it. So there's not a lot of moving parts on the inside. But anyway, going back to I think that might be my last slide here. Is that it? Coming up on that?
Yep.
All right, so I have no more after this one, right?
Nope.
I don't even have the one that says thank you for attending. Okay, so anyway, we're at the end. What are we at on time? Yeah, we're about 45 minutes in or so. Listen, I appreciate you, and I certainly appreciate you joining us. Hope you picked up a few tips today as it pertains to rebuilding a centrifugal pump. Again, please subscribe to our on your YouTube. I think Derek told me there's a little bell there. If you click that bell, you'll get notifications, and that will let you know every time we're going to do a live stream broadcast. And like I said, we've got a lot of them planned. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. Send that code word cartridge in. There'll be a different one in the subsequent sessions that we're going to run. But anyway, that said, I hope you all have a great weekend. And with that, there's nothing better for ground coffee than ground water. Cheers.